And just 1 minute, and I think most of you have joined us before because obviously these are happening every day, Monday to Friday. So I heard that you guys had a great time on Wednesday with Laura Slynn from Avalon Empowerment. I heard that went fantastic. And then yesterday, Shannon was talking all things communication. So how to actually break down who you're or adjust your strategy or your communication style depending on who you're talking to right now. It just gives us a lot of clarity and focus so we can stay positive, stay in action and in strategy, which I think is really key. Hi, Peter. So as always, we're about to introduce a really important guest who's going to help us all with a lot of skills and strategies we need to work really seamlessly, if anything, even more productively remote. So if you have questions, I will be watching the chat so that if Nick takes a break or at the end, he's open to answer questions. I'm assuming he is. I didn't ask him, but I'll ask him momentarily. Yes, he's saying yes. That we can have those as we go at the end. So feel free, add your questions into chat as always. And I'm seeing a whole bunch of people jump on, so we know it's 101. So I'm formally going to introduce everyone to Nick and Nick Sonnensberg, and he's joining us from, are you in New York right now? Yeah. Okay, yeah, he's in New York right now, so awesome. So just to, before I read the official information that you guys need to have, we had been looking to do, we always do a beta test with anybody who we're going to bring to Ultimate Team Summit. And those of you who don't know what that is, that's a big event we run every November in Niagara Falls, and knock on wood, we will, a lot of us, be together and running that event again in November, I would hope. But we're always doing tests to see what works, because we haven't brought it up a lot in these masterminds, but we work with, 80% of our clients are top 1%. We work with 100 deal plus, 500 deal plus, 300 deal plus teams, 1,000 deal plus teams per year. So we're always testing new ways that are going to give them efficiency, and essentially we bring them usually to our Ultimate 100 Deal Plus Mastermind in June. We have a couple of teams test it out, and then they come in November to our other event and we open it up to our entire platform. So we do that every single year. So as a company, we've actually been working with Nick's company, Get Leverage, I think for a year. I want to say a year. It might be more, it might be a little bit less. Time, like Ron said, is a bit blurred right now. But we have been ecstatic with their ability to help us even remotely increase like our optimization, automate things, plug in more advanced technology that was just outside of the scope of our immediate team right now. And we've been really thrilled with that. So I'm so very happy and excited that Nick was willing to come and share with us earlier and connect with all of you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Get Leverage, which is the company that Nick runs and owns. Leverage is an on-demand outsourcing platform designed to help small business owners and entrepreneurs scale without the pain, cost, and risk of hiring. They serve as an agile extension to your team with 100+ highly skilled vetted professionals. Whether you need help building a website, managing a social media platform, documenting processes, creating content, or brainstorming ways to grow your business, a membership with Leverage and their team of on-demand experts can make it happen. Delegate your tasks and projects to them and get it done in less time. And their website, I'll put it in chat, but is just simply getleverage.com if you're looking for that. And Nick is joining us today. So Nick Sonnensberg is the founder and CEO of Leverage, business efficiency consultant, Inc., columnist and author of the book Idea to Execution. He is also the co-founder of the Bullseye Mastermind with Lee Brower. As a serial entrepreneur with a passion for productivity and a background in data science, Nick's mission is to create companies that disrupt the way people work by leveraging the power of outsourcing, remote teams, common tools, and automation. Nick has worked with individuals and companies of all sizes, including Tony Robbins, Jay Abraham, Joe Polish, Ethereum, you're going to correct me on that after, Nick, and more. Be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming book, Come Up for Air, How Your Team Can Leverage Systems and Tools to Stop Drowning in Work. I don't even know about that book, and that's so perfect for so many people on this mastermind. So help me welcome Nick. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to unmute you in case it's on my end. Nope, it's on your end. Oops.
Yep. I think I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Welcome, welcome.
All right, thanks for having me. It's Ethereum, the cryptocurrency. So there's Bitcoin, and then Ethereum is the number 2 cryptocurrency.
Oh, we've found out in these masterminds that I pronounce a phenomenal amount of words incorrectly and names, and yet I'm in the speaking business. Here we are.
It's good. All
Yeah.
right. Well, excited to be here. How long do we have? It's an hour, an hour?
We have, everybody's here up to 90 minutes, but we don't have to
Okay.
take that full time.
No problem.
So, yeah.
Well, I've prepared some slides, but I want this to be as helpful as possible for people. So, if people are posting questions, feel free to interrupt me. We don't have to wait till the end for formal QA. If someone has a question, happy to go and spend a bit more time on a particular topic.
That's excellent. Yep, fantastic.
Cool. All right. So thanks for joining. And I'm excited also to be speaking at your conference in Niagara Falls. So hopefully that still happens. We had to cancel we're moving virtual for our Bullseye conference. But I prepared some slides. I understand that this is a difficult time for many people, that maybe you're on right now on this call and you've never been remote before, and this is just a complete shock. Or you might be someone that has already had a team remote and you might have heard of some of these tools, but there's still going to be a lot of takeaways for you as well, because in my experience with working from Tony to Ethereum to Poopery to coaching clients and vet hospitals, people, even if you know about the tools, most people don't know when to use the tools, how to use the tools, and how to get the most out of them. So if you've never heard of some, you might have never heard of some of these, and that's great. You'll have a piece of knowledge of new tools that you might want to be using. But also you might have heard of these tools, but I might give you an awareness on how to use them better in a better context and get more out of them. So sound good? Should we just get started with the slides? All right, let me share my screen. You see that? See my screen all right, Kathleen? Great. So I titled this talk, How to Make Remote Work Actually Work. I created a free Facebook group with that name. So if this information you find helpful, you could go and feel free to join that free Facebook group. And also I put some additional tools and resources. I created a quick link for you guys, kb.getleverage.com, if any of those tools are helpful for you. Not going to spend too much time on my bio. You've already introduced me, but I've written books on remote work. Idea to Execution is a story of how I bootstrapped my company Leverage to 7 figures the first year, and we never had an office. And we hit 7 figures, 100 people by using systems and tools that I'm going to be sharing with you in smart ways. And Leverage now is 5 years old, and from the very beginning, we were set up to be efficient and remote, never had an office. And so I have a lot of experience. I'm not just going to be telling you things from theory or from consulting with other people. I use my company Leverage as an experiment lab where I could tinker with and play around with all of these tools and find the best practice. And then about 10% of my time I spend on my mastermind and private consultant and my private clients. So really what I'm sharing with you is from experience of what's worked growing my company Leverage. So from my experience working with Leverage, working with Tony and all these other people, I found a pattern in terms of where people were struggling. And it didn't matter if you're a 2-person vet hospital or you're a 1,000-person cryptocurrency company. Every company, no matter size or industry, this included Leverage, everyone needed 3 kind of key operational efficiency components to their companies. And I found this pattern and I call it CPR, and that stands for Communicate, Plan, and Resource. And that's the business efficiency framework that I've developed and that we run my company off of, and I coach people and consult people on. And basically, if you get these 3 things right, and I'll show you technologies to help you implement each of these 3 components, that's really all you need to have a well-oiled machine in terms of an operational framework. And at a high level, the whole purpose of using these tools and technologies is so that you can find information as quickly as possible. So this is a little quote that from me, but I believe a company can only scale as fast as knowledge can be transferred. So I'm not just going to be telling you tools for the sake of you needing another tool. It's so that ultimately the purpose of it is so that knowledge can be transferred faster in your company. And I'll start off, and we're not going to spend too much time on this. The answer key is in that URL I gave you, kb.getleverage.com, so you can see the answer key. But I developed just 17 questions or situations that are common situations to be in. You have an idea for a non-urgent project. You have to find the paid time off policy in your company. You want to let your team know about a new hire starting today, right? Like, these are all just things that happen in whatever type of business you're in. This is normal stuff. But the thing is, if I were to ask you what you think is the right tool to use in each of these situations, and if I were to ask every person in your team what they think, and I can tell you this from experience, every person for the most part is going to give a different answer, right? And that just highlights how fragmented we are with the technology that we have at our disposal right now. So my CPR framework is to lay a guideline or a foundation in terms of in what situation should we use what tools, how to think about these tools, and how to get the most out of these tools. Because honestly, if I could tell you a tool, but if you don't know when to use it and how to use it, it could hurt your team's productivity. So again, I don't want to go through this, but I just wanted to highlight and start triggering some thoughts on your side in terms of, oh yeah, you're right. Sometimes I'll share ideas in text. Sometimes I'll do it in email. Sometimes I'll do it in Slack without any rhyme or reason. And that's where a scavenger hunt starts getting created in companies. And ultimately, I'm here to help you solve that scavenger hunt. It's important because what I found, and it's really just math, because my background's I'm a mathematician by trade, so I like to always support things with data and analytics. But companies become exponentially more complex with team size. And here's a little demonstration to show you that. So you might have a 5-person team. That's great. It's going to be much easier to implement some of these things than if you're a 500-person. But the sooner you do this, the better, because it exponentially gets harder every person that you add. So here's a demonstration of what I mean. If you were to have 3 people on your team, there's 3 ways that you guys can connect. When you're a 4-person team, there's 6 ways to connect. 5 people, 10. And you can see that very, very quickly, once you even get to 14 people, there's 91 ways to connect. So you can imagine what that looks like if you're a 20-person or a 100-person team. It becomes more and more important that you have this framework because information can get lost exponentially more easily as you grow. And it's compounded the fact that we're all now in a distributed remote environment. It's even more critical that you have an operational framework so that information doesn't take 10 times longer to find. And I like to call this the scavenger hunt, right? We've all been there where it's like, hey, what did Kathleen tell me? Is it here, there, or there? And you end up spending 10 times longer to find stuff, right? If you're in strategic coach, Dan Sullivan has this concept of unique ability, and it's not in anyone's unique ability to spend 10 times longer than needed to find a document or to go back and find, hey, what did Kathleen tell me, right? And I really believe that that if you run your company from the perspective of optimizing for your employees to work on things that are in their unique ability or that give them joy, you're probably going to be doing a pretty good job in terms of optimizing for profit as well. So before getting into CPR, there's a couple of just general things that everyone should be thinking about. So one is automation. So there's a tool called Zapier, Zapier, and that's one of the core tools that we use at Leverage. That's an automation tool that connects 2 third-party services together. So if this happens in this one tool, trigger this event to happen in another tool. Automation is great because they never call in sick, complain, they never mess up. You can be assured that automation is going to perform the same process exactly the same time 100% of the time. So this is Zapier, and it's trigger and action based. So it integrates with a lot of the tools that I'm going to be talking about. So If someone signs up on your website, trigger an email to get sent out, trigger a notification in a tool called Slack, update a file in Dropbox. You could have one trigger cause 20 actions if you want. It's a very, very powerful tool, and it's not very expensive. They have a free version as well. And it has thousands of connections. Okay, so let's get into CPR. The first part of CPR is communication. And this is like the oxygen of your company. If you can't be communicating efficiently, everything else suffers, right? And it's no surprise that in war, one of the key strategies in war is to cut off your enemy's lines of communication. So communication is what I always start with. It's the lowest hanging fruit in your company, and it's relatively quick versus some of the other aspects I'm going to be sharing with you in terms of getting set up. So within communication, I break it into 3 different buckets. I think that we all have personal communication, external communication with clients, internal communication with team members. That's the way I look at it. And the problem that we face is that when we start using the same tool for all different contexts, that's the first problem that we have with creating that scavenger hunt. So for the most part, and there's exceptions to every rule, obviously, but for the most part, I recommend text for personal, email for external, and a tool like Slack, or if you're on Microsoft, there's Microsoft Teams for internal. So that alone, if you were to just follow that, you're already making it much easier to find information. So even if you're not optimizing these tools, at least now it's, oh, my team member messaged me. I have to go and refer to Andrew. Andrew's a team member. So the most likely place to find that communication Slack. So I've already cut down by 2/3 where I have to look. I'm not looking through text. I'm not looking through email. I'm looking through Slack, right? Now, we've all been using email for decades, but most of us aren't using email efficiently. So the way I look at email is it's just a to-do list that other people can add to. And there's a few key features within email to make it more robust so that it's working so that you take back control over it. Now, a misconception that a lot of clients that I work with have is they think that they're managing email well, but that's because they're at unread 0, which is not the same as inbox 0. Big difference, right? Your eye is still processing all those emails, even if it's not bold. It's not easy to keep track of exactly what you need to action on. So getting to inbox 0 is critical, because then email can become a to-do list. And at the end of every day, just like you're trying to knock off all the things on your to-do list, you try to get to inbox 0. There's only 3 things that you can do with an email. You either reply, archive, or defer. So I have an acronym for it called RAD. I know I'm going really quick. Usually like just inbox 0, when I work with people, we spend 1 or 2 hours to get people to inbox 0. So I'm giving you the quick version of all of this stuff, but still, this should be helpful in the immediate term to getting your inbox a bit better in terms of control. So when I say defer, in Gmail, you have that clock icon up there for snoozing. And if you're using Outlook, they also have one. There's also Boomerang extension that you can integrate in Outlook as well. But the use case of deferring email would be, say you theme your days, your work week, and on Mondays is your day for admin work. So if Tuesday through Sunday, you get any email in that has to do with admin that's not urgent, snooze it to Monday and deal with it on Monday. If you have driving directions to a new client's office, if we ever are able to drive again and go and see people in person, you don't need that sitting in your inbox for the next month if the meeting's in 6 weeks. Snooze it till the morning of that meeting when it's most relevant. And the great thing with snoozing is if someone updates the email thread, it'll knock it out of snooze and go straight back to the top of your inbox. So that's a really great tool that you should be using in your toolbox in order to help you get rid of get to inbox 0 and get things that are not urgent out of your line of sight. So let's move on to internal communication. That's the very quick version of external. There's a tool called Slack or Teams that are so useful and so much more robust for internal communication. And there's a few key features that these tools have that really are game changers for how your teams can operate and communicate. So the one big difference is just the process of separating internal versus external is huge. You're not looking in multiple places. You know, hey, this is where internal communication goes. There's an additional benefit of doing that is you can then prioritize your day a little bit better. For me, replying to my team is a higher priority than replying to prospects or clients. So I get to Slack 0 as part of my morning routine before I get to inbox 0, right? Because if someone on my team is stuck and they can't move forward without me getting back to them, that's my highest priority. So I'm only able to do that because I've separated my internal versus external. They also have a whole library of third-party integrations that superpower these tools. And then they have this concept, both of them have a concept called channels. And I'll get into that in a minute, but that's probably the most beneficial feature of this versus text and email. So a few things to consider with these tools, because I've seen a lot of companies use Slack, but they set it up the wrong way, or Teams, and they set it up the wrong way, and it uses its value. So things that you want to consider are private versus public channels. The difference is a private channel means that you can control who gets added to those channels. Channels are just topics. So you could have a channel called finance, a channel called marketing. You could have a channel called finance-payroll just to talk about payroll. And maybe different people are in that channel versus finance-tax. So you can get really specific with channels, which are just topics of conversations. And you should be, by default, I recommend making most of them private versus public, because one of the big problems I see in companies is too many things are public, and then people get curious, and before you know it, you have all these individuals in hundreds of different channels or topics, and it's killing their productivity without them even realizing it. So that's something just to keep in mind. Naming conventions of channels are huge too. Another pitfall that I see is people start creating these channels, and they'll have a channel called marketing-Facebook, and then they'll have another channel, Facebook-marketing. And then it's kind of back to that principle of, is that helping you to facilitate transferring knowledge as quickly as possible? And now you have to start looking in two different Facebook channels because you have no idea what the difference between the two are. So come up with naming conventions so that you're not having to get confused between where should information live. So things to consider with naming conventions, there's character limits with a lot of these tools. So be strategic and try to come up with naming conventions at scale. So instead of writing out marketing or finance, maybe you want to have FIN, FIN, or MKT, just to cut it down. That way you can extend those channels down the road a little bit more easily. And one of the real superpowers of these tools are there's third-party integrations. So, and again, I'm going quick and I understand that. So take a look at the additional tools that I was sharing with you, but this is really just to give you a snippet of what is possible and how remote can be an advantage if you use these tools in the right way. So here's just a couple of tools of third-party integrations that you could utilize with Slack. So I'll just go through a few here. So let's take a look at Giphy and Donut. So on the left is Giphy, and it sounds silly, but if you're remote, you can't walk up to someone anymore and give them a high five. So it's not just about being efficient, but you also want to maintain culture in a remote environment. So you could say to someone, good job, and that's fine, but you could also do /Giphy good job, and it just makes it a little bit more fun. You get some funny little video snippet that pops up, but it creates a culture, and it makes it a lot nicer to spend a significant amount of your day in this tool. There's another bot that we use called Donut, which randomly matches two people together in Slack. So it's a great way to make sure that different people are talking to each other. right? And these are just two of thousands of third-party integrations that you can see in the Slack App Store. We have a water cooler channel, but I think that you should have an all company for announcements channel. Now they've just released this concept of sections and folders, which is something that even makes it easier than before to organize channels. And it integrates with video conferencing tools like Zoom. So you could easily spin up Zoom conference calls directly from Slack. So moving on, inside of this umbrella of communication, we're on Zoom right now. That's obviously going to be a critical tool as you go through this transition to remote. So Zoom is a really, really powerful tool, and there's some best practices with Zoom. You can see on the left, that was me this week as a potato. The way that I did that avocado, Kathleen, was I installed Snap Camera from Snapchat, and you could start making funny faces with yourself. So these are little things, but if you're remote, you have to have a bit of fun with these tools. It's going to get too dry and boring if you're not doing Giphies or playing around with background images. So I think that it sounds silly, but I think that these are important things in order to lighten up the culture. Other things that I recommend with Zoom is in general, obviously you can't do it 100% of the time, but have a policy where by default the video's on so people can see each other's faces. I think that that's really important now that you're not in the office anymore. What I do a lot for my communication is I'll record myself doing a Zoom to explain a concept, and I'll send a link to that Zoom recording in a Slack channel to the team. That's a big way that I'm communicating asynchronously with the team. So asynchronous communication in general is a huge productivity gain. You don't have to coordinate schedules with people. People can watch that video recording whenever they want. They're hearing my voice, they're seeing my face. So I think that video is a real powerful tool that people don't utilize enough when they're communicating with their teams. And it's especially important when you're running a team remotely. Yeah, and then also there's breakout rooms with Zoom, and I already talked about this, but you have Slack integration, so you could just do /Zoom, and the two of you or the group in that Slack channel are all in a Zoom room together. So before I get into planning the P part, are there any questions up to this point? I know I'm going pretty fast. Do you want me to keep going, or are there some questions around communication that I could answer? I don't want people to wait 40 minutes to ask me a question.
Yeah, no questions yet, but this is kind of your prompt. So if you have one, I'm watching chat. And it's all fantastic information. I definitely have noted the Snap Camera to add to my future entertaining ventures. Let's see. Yeah, I think we're good to keep going. I think everyone's just taking it in, Nick. Yeah, for sure.
No problem. All right. I know for some it can be a fire hose, some of this, so I wanted to just give people a little space there to ask a question if they had. Yeah, so let's get into the P part of CPR, and that's for planning. Okay. Now, I use this example all the time to explain what is a planning tool versus a communication tool, because a lot of people are using text or email or Slack to delegate tasks or projects to people, but they're using the wrong tool for the wrong context. So the way that I explain this is, imagine you were going to go camping in the forest with your team. You guys would need walkie-talkies to communicate with each other, but you would also need a map to navigate out of the forest. So we just covered the walkie-talkies, right? The personal walkie-talkies, the team walkie-talkies, the client walkie-talkies. Now we're going to get into the map. And every company needs a map, and that's just project management software. But it's important that you understand conceptually the difference between a communication tool versus a project management software. Because if you don't understand that, then there's no sense of kind of going deeper in terms of the advanced functionality of project management software. So there's a whole bunch of different tools out there for project management. We use Asana at Leverage. We used to use Trello. there's a whole bunch. Any of them can work. The most important thing, though, is to understand when should you use a project management software, and then making sure that you're using it correctly. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people have the misconception, oh, you can only be successful if you use this one. Like at the end of the day, they're all pretty similar. Like there's not that many different, I mean, they might have different design and a few different pieces of functionality, but you can get any of them to work. You could get Microsoft Teams to work or Slack to work. You could get Outlook to work or Gmail to work. It really, the main thing that you have to be focused on is understanding when should you use a certain type of tool and making sure that you're using it to the highest and best use. So any of those you can get to work. I'm just going to demonstrate Asana because this is what we use. But again, any of them could work. Asana, at a high level, you create teams. And within teams, you have projects. And they're pretty much any project management software worth a grain of salt has similar hierarchy. And then within a project, you have sections. And within sections, you have tasks. That's pretty much how any project management software in the world is going to work. Asana has a few bells and whistles that I feel make it one of the better ones. But again, at a high level, that's how it's broken down. Now, in a project in Asana, you can assign an owner, a due date, have milestones on a project, and you can do status updates on a project level. Now, most people that are using this tool, that in my consulting and Mastermind, when I look at how people are using it, this is one of the most underutilized features of Asana that people aren't taking advantage of. So I really recommend whatever tool you use, you should assign the project to a person and do updates on a project level. If you're used to a tool like Trello, that's great. One thing that I like about Asana is you can have the list view. So you can have a project be in list view like this, or you can have the project be in a board view or a Kanban view like this, which is similar to how Trello lays things out. It's the same exact information, it's just a personal preference, but they give you the option for either. You can have milestones. And then also, this is how a task looks. So on a task level, you have an assignee, due dates. Tasks can live in multiple projects, which is very valuable. You can have subtasks. You can create custom fields. So we created a field called priority. And then we created our own custom drop-down things within priority. And then that allows you to filter and search. If I wanted to know, show me all high priority tasks at Leverage, in 2 seconds, I could tell you that because of the way that we've used this. Another thing that I like about this versus some of the other project management softwares is you can, if you notice at the top, you can only assign one person to a task. Now at the bottom, you can see collaborators. So you could have multiple collaborators, but you only have one owner. And I like that because I believe that if more than one person owns something, then no one owns it. So this is great. And there's other project management softwares out there where you can assign 10 people to a task. But I've found in my experience that you start running into issues where people don't feel like they have ownership, and then balls get dropped because everyone's pointing fingers at other people because it wasn't clear who the exact owner was. So you can put really detailed description in these things. We use it to prioritize our key projects backlog. So when we get into our quarterly planning, we look at this project, which is broken down by all the projects that we're thinking about doing for the year. And then we created a custom field, which you can see on the right, called timeframe. So when we do our quarterly planning, we start updating, is this a Q2, Q3, Q4 thing? And that's part of our process when we start defining the key projects we're going to tackle in a quarter. And a few other things that I feel are really, really beneficial with Asana. So we do a lot of communication in Asana as it relates to a project or task, because that's the most direct and obvious place to have that conversation. So if Kathleen assigned me a task to do this webinar, and that task is in Asana, I wouldn't be texting Kathleen questions about the webinar. I would be going into that task and I would say, Kathleen, what time should I show up, or what do I need to do? So that's the most logical place for communication to live as it relates to the task or project. They also have an inbox. So the inbox is basically just a place where all the conversations that are relevant to tasks or projects are happening. So just like you get to inbox 0 or Slack 0 in communication tools, part of my daily routine is to get to inbox 0 in Asana. Another best practice is I suggest putting due dates on any task or project that you're working on. And it's fine if you don't hit the due date, you can update a new due date. But due dates are really valuable because there is, I don't know if I have a slide to show this. Let's see. If you notice at the top left here, you have My Tasks. What happens in that My Tasks is across all your projects and all of your tasks, it's one place where everything that you're assigned to lives. And then you can categorize in My Tasks what you're going to work on today, what you're going to work on within a week, and what you're going to work on later. And if you have a due date, it will automatically move things from upcoming to today if it's due within 24 hours. And it'll automatically move things from later to upcoming if it's due within a week. So you can totally control in which section it lives. But then you also, if you have a due date, it will automatically cascade for you. So it's a great way for you to just know what is the most important thing for you to be working on right now. And at a high level, it sounds basic, but that's really probably one of the most important things that as a business owner, you're able to achieve. Like if every person in your company knows what's the most important thing I need to work on today, you're probably in pretty good shape. And if this tool can be helpful, which I think it is, then great. But if you have another way of doing that, then that's fine too. In my experience, a lot of companies, because they're not using systems and tools properly, if you were to ask a team member, what's the most important thing for you to work on right now, it's probably not what's in their manager or your mind. So this is a great way to make sure everyone's on the same page. So part of planning too is having some form of a meeting cadence. And now that you're remote, how you run meetings is going to be a little bit different. So we have a policy at Leverage, which is no agenda, no meeting. So if you want to have a meeting, or we have a weekly standing meeting, we run those agenda. It has to have an agenda, and the agenda has to be collaborative so people can all add to the agenda. We have there's different types of meetings. We have a weekly meeting, which is a 90-minute meeting. We loosely follow the EOS methodology, which actually Gino Wickman from Tractions is doing a Facebook Live in my group next week. So if you're interested in EOS, Traction's a great book to read. Basically, they have a structure to meetings where you start with going over wins, team member or client updates, scorecard, ROC review, and then you get into the meat of it, which is identify, discuss, solve, which is the majority of the meeting. Now, you don't have to follow EOS. You can create your own, but I do feel like having structure to meetings and having an agenda are both critical for you to be having efficient meetings. So the types of meetings you might want to consider, especially if this is new for you, you might want to have a daily stand-up, like a 15-minute stand-up with your team, just checking in. And if you don't know how to run that, the most simple way to run that meeting is you ask 3 simple questions. What are you doing today? What did you do yesterday? What are you blocked on? It's a pretty simple one. And there's probably a few other recurring meetings that you want to have. We have a longer form monthly strategy meeting. We have that's a 4-hour meeting. We have weekly 90-minute meetings. And then we also have one-on-ones. All of them have agendas, which we store in Asana. So we're using Asana as our agenda tool. And I'll show you that. I showed you integrations with Slack. One of the integrations is a bot called Stand-Uply. So you could automate your stand-ups by using Stand-Uply. And what this bot will do is you can program the bot to ask whatever questions you want to whichever people you want, and they'll answer the bot, and then the bot will aggregate everyone's responses and post those responses in one Slack channel. So then you could go asynchronous on the stand-ups. So I already kind of talked about this, but this is loosely the EOS framework of weekly meetings. We started finding that having a monthly strategy day, because a 90-minute meeting is great, but you can't cover everything in 90 minutes. There's some things like a pricing change to your company that is going to require multiple hours of thought. So what we started doing was we started putting a recurring meeting on the calendar for strategy days to cover those longer discussion items. And then we have a process for our quarterlies, and we're right now at the start of a new quarter. Q2 just started. So we have our own structure, but basically over the course of the last week of every quarter, we have set meetings that we do, where we do a retrospective planning days. We are updating throughout the quarter opportunities and challenges that we have. We review that. So we have a set process. You can come up with your own. I'm happy to also share with you in more detail our process. But what we found was investing in that week where you have these structured conversations. It basically reduces the amount of time that you have to spend for the other 12 weeks of the quarter deciding on projects and tasks and all that stuff. So we do the majority of stuff in that week. And for the most part, 80% of the quarter is pretty much locked in after that point for us. Obviously, things come up, but we spend the majority of time on our quarterly meetings defining the key projects. So what we also found was it's important to have goals, and you could call a goal an OKR or a ROC or whatever operational framework that you like using. So we do goal setting, but what we do is we only spend about 20% of the time on goal setting, and we do 80% of the time on key project defining. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that you have control over in terms of hitting those goals are the key projects that you decide to do that are going to help you achieve those goals. So we spend much more time defining those projects, who owns it, what's the definition of done, etc. We also have a policy that, another important thing with having these recurring meetings is you're now giving your team space to ask questions, share ideas, raise concerns. So what you don't want to do is set up Slack and now you have a bunch of noise coming into that tool versus it used to come in with text and email. You don't want to just transfer crap from one tool to another. So something that's a huge productivity gain for us has been, if you have these weekly or monthly or these recurring meetings, you have a policy that if something's non-urgent and you have a meeting within a week, let's say, have them add it to that meeting agenda. That way they're not worried that they're going to forget it. But at the same time, they're not also distracting you from your day-to-day activities. And it's a huge productivity gain to batch go over ideas or problems. So that's the whole point of having a collaborative agenda, is that people can now add those things to the agenda and you just cover it all in one shot. And this is how we do agendas in Asana. Now you could use Google Docs or other tools. There's Navigator. I could give you a whole bunch of other solutions here. But what I found helpful is using the project management software that you have picked to run your agendas, because a lot of things that come out of a meeting are action items. So if the action items were already to-do items in the agenda in your project management software, you just have to click a button and move it to the right project, and it was already in that software to begin with. So I've created various agenda projects in Asana. This is my one-on-one project. So no one else is in this project. This is just a place for me to store topics of conversation with people the next time we have a meeting, right? So it might be that I don't want to Slack or email Andrew something, but the next time we do a live Zoom, I want to cover a few topics with him. So I'm brain dumping those things I want to cover with him in this one-on-one project. I also have an agenda for, I do a mastermind with Lee Brower from Strategic Coach. I have an agenda project where I'm storing things. We're both in that project, adding agenda items for things that we'll cover on our next meeting. I have our level 10 meeting with our executive team, et cetera. So I have an agenda for each type of contextual meeting that I have, and I'm storing items for those agendas in the respective project. We already talked about this. One thing that we also do in our meetings is the first 5 minutes, we just do personal catch up. How are you doing? What's going on in your personal life? What did you do over the weekend? Now that you're not going to be meeting with people in person, it's important that you still have those types of conversations. So we bake that into the meeting framework. And a couple of pro tips, and this is the last piece of planning. Obviously, again, this is not all that you need, right? We could spend hours on just meeting optimization, but I'm just trying to give you guys the high level here. But the last part of planning that I think is important is have a moderator for your meetings so that you ensure that people don't start going off topic for 20 minutes on one line item and you had 20 other line items. So have a moderator. If there's any actionable next steps that come out of that meeting, load it into the project management software. Document decisions. This is something that most people aren't doing, but the next piece of this presentation is going to get into knowledge capture. And you should have a wiki. And in that wiki, I really suggest you have a section where you document decisions made in meetings. We've all been there before, and I'm terrible at this, but I forget 50+% of decisions that were made. If you were to ask me kind of what was the outcome of this decision made 6 months ago, I have no idea. But I have a place where I could go back and I could say, oh, we decided to raise this person on this meeting, or we decided to make a company policy change on this meeting. It's all documented so that anyone could go back and see notes on when and how a decision was made. And another productivity gain that we had was on my one-on-one meetings. We used to make them hour-long meetings where people would tell me updates on what they worked on last week, and that would take about half the time. So what we did was we cut the meetings to 30 minutes, and that portion of the report out, we moved to asynchronous. So now on a Friday, they would give me a video telling me what they worked on for the week. I could watch that video at my own leisure whenever I wanted over the weekend. So then on Monday, we would really just use that 30 minutes now for high-level brainstorming or things that actually required synchronous communication. All right. So we're going to get into the resource part, but I see that there's some activity in the chat. So is there I'll pause for a second. Are there any questions, Kathleen, to go over with regard to project management?
No, there was some questions about just cost for Asana. So we were sharing what we paid for because we use it as well. And just for the real estate, people who are using CRMs for transactional reasons, like we've got our database plans, it's all set up. So I was just explaining, transactional, we're still on CRM, but Asana is great for obviously outside projects, marketing, like everything else kind of thing. And I don't know if you want to add to that or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I think we pay something like 10 or 11 bucks a user. They have a more premium version that's like 20 something, where you get a few other bells and whistles. But at the end of the day, yes, the softwares I'm presenting will add cost. But if a piece of software improves your team's productivity by a certain percentage, it's like you can't afford not to pay for it, because even if you're paying $1,000 or $5,000 a month in software, if you're getting an extra 20% productivity out of your entire workforce, it's a no-brainer. And then I don't have this in the slides, but if cost is something that people worry about with these tools, there's a tool called trackapp.g2.com, and you can connect that to your QuickBooks or credit cards, and it gives you analytics and alerts around all of your software expenses. So it could show you graphs of how much are you paying each month for all of your recurring software costs. Any other questions?
Not so far. No, just that there's a recording, and we are, if you're okay with it, Nick, we usually do send out the recording to everyone registered.
Great. All right.
Awesome. We're good.
So let's get into this part. So I want people right now to just think about one of the most critical team members in their company. It could be yourself, or you could think about your CFO or your head of operations. It doesn't matter, but think about that. And now imagine, and this is actually a real scenario, right? I think that this is something that is about to become a thing that hasn't yet become a thing. But imagine your number one person tells you that they're sick, they just got coronavirus, and for the next 2 weeks, you have no access to them. They're completely out of commission. What are you going to do? Are you set up for that? So this is something that I really feel is one of the most overlooked things right now, and people really should be starting to think about this much more seriously. I know that the whole transition to remote is a big deal, and maybe you've never heard of Asana or Slack. Now, I'm going to show you right now tools that will help you with this stuff. And I classify knowledge capture in two buckets: capturing static knowledge in the form of a wiki, and dynamic knowledge, which I call process, in the form of process documentation. The way I think of these two things is static knowledge or a wiki answers the question who, what, when, where, why. Who's the CEO? What were the decisions made on a certain meeting? When's the monthly town hall? These are all just things, SOPs that you need to capture. But then you have other types of knowledge and those are what I call processes, and that answers the question how. How do you onboard a new team member? How do you do payroll? Where it's still knowledge, but it's a sequence of steps that need to be done in a certain order. And I just shared that previous slide because there's certain critical processes in all of our companies that if it's not run, it's going to make a significant impact to the business in a negative way. So something like payroll, that's probably something that needs to happen. And if only one person in your company knows how to do payroll, and that person gets sick with the coronavirus and is out for a month or 2 weeks or whatever it is, you're going to be stuck in a really bad situation. So if you're scrambling right now, like even if you write it out in an email and send out a documented process, it's better than nothing. But I think everyone really needs to be thinking about what are the critical processes in my company where there's a bottleneck. And if that person got sick, it's going to cause a huge detriment to the company. So payroll is one. We did a 4-hour meeting 2 weeks ago about this. And what we identified was, well, if our developer gets sick and he's out, and simultaneously the token of Salesforce expires and he's the only person that knows how to rotate the token, I'm not going to get into the technicalities, but this is important to us. If the token expires and we can't rotate the token, our whole backend fails. It's really, really deeply intertwined with Salesforce. So that was a specific risk for us. So we mitigated that risk by not waiting 3 months for the token or however long we had. We forced a rotation of that token 2 weeks ago. That way we're good for the next 3 or 4 months. And if Josh gets sick, we've reduced our risk on that process. So I think obviously that's specific to me, but I think the thinking process is really important, especially right now, to identify your key risks and stress test them, write them down and identify backups and have other people run certain processes right now so that you're not stuck in a bad situation when it's too late. So here are a few tools that you could use if you have never used a wiki before. Ask Spoke is one. We use Notion right now. Confluence is another. There's a million of them. Ask Spoke is a really cool tool. It integrates with Slack. So the benefit of this tool is it's this Slack bot that's living inside of Slack, where already the team is already spending the majority of their day in this tool. And you can ask the bot a question, and the bot will do natural language processing, look up in the knowledge base for an answer. And if it can find the answer, it'll return the answer automatically. So this is an example. I asked the bot, what's the vision of the company? And from that one question, the bot was smart enough to look in the knowledge base and return the article. So this is just another example of third-party integrations to supercharge how things are run in Slack. The downfall, though, of Ask Spoke is you have to know ahead of time what to ask. So you can't just go on an exploration and find information. You have to know explicitly what you want to ask. So this is what Notion looks like, and you can organize it, and there's very little learning curve. It's a really, really intuitive and clear way of organizing your static information. So here's an example. Like, we have a page for our OKRs, our objectives and key results. So if someone wants to see what are the yearly goals or the quarterly goals or our strengths and weaknesses, it's really easy to go from here, click on the OKR page, and now you have another page where all of the OKRs are stored. So what I'm trying to say with all this stuff is it's important to digitize your knowledge. You don't want one person to be walking around with all the knowledge in their head. If that person were to quit, get coronavirus, something were to happen, you don't want to be stuck in a bad place. You know, part of being productive or moving forward faster is about avoiding moving backwards. So these are great tools and strategies to avoid moving backwards. So what I would suggest everyone to do today is identify a backup for each core process and be proactive right now. Use it to your advantage that you don't have people that are sick right now, and rotate people right now to stress test that you have backups for those core processes. Now, in general, for the last handful of years, every quarter when we identify kind of quarterly projects to work on, we rotate roles for a quarter. So we identify one critical process and we have a week of role rotation every quarter at Leverage. And this is a concept that I steal from the days where I was a high frequency trader. So when I was in finance, I was on Wall Street for 8 years as an algorithmic quantitative trader. And when in that position, every year you'd have to take a 2-week block leave. And the purpose was to make sure that I wasn't hiding any trades. But in order for me to leave, before I left, I would have to document how my algorithms work, how my portfolio traded. And every year for 8 years, no matter what, when I would come back from vacation, there was always an improvement to my algorithm. And that's because fresh eyes spark innovation. So there's huge advantages to doing this in general. But to say the least, right now, it's absolutely critical that you role rotate and you're proactive on this so that you're not stuck in a bad place. God forbid someone gets sick. So as I said, this is a way to de-risk things. You'll get breakthroughs. Having new eyes on processes will facilitate breakthroughs. But then also you can save a lot of time. And I'll get into a tool right now called Process Street, which is the tool that we recommend for documenting your processes. But tools like this, you can save time because it integrates with that tool Zapier that I first shared with you. So you can start automating steps of processes. So this tool, it's different than project management, which was what we were covering with Asana. This is process management. And there's a key difference between the two. A process is basically a set of predefined steps that need to be followed in a certain order. And for instance, in payroll, there's a certain order that things need to happen. And what you might find is steps 1 through 4 could be done in any order, but all 4 need to be done before you get to step 5. So tools like this allow you to do things like that. You can assign different people to be responsible for different steps. You can have intake questions. You could force things to happen. So you can't get to step 2 unless you completed all the sub-steps of step 1. You could automate various steps. You can make things dynamic. So you could have a general process for hiring, but then you could have a drop down where you select, are you hiring someone for design versus marketing? And if you select marketing, you could then dynamically have different sequence of steps automatically be displayed dynamically because of that selection. We run our quarterly planning process here. So this is our process for doing our quarterly planning. We have a call or a meeting with key stakeholders to identify obstacles and opportunities. We review what the yearly goals were. We create new quarterly goals. We identify key projects. And then we do a final call where where each person presents what they're committed to doing for the quarter. And what we do before we wrap up our quarterly is we already book next quarter's meetings on the calendar. So we just wrapped up Q2, and at the final step of us wrapping up Q2 is we've already blocked off the Q3 planning dates at the end of June. So we don't have to start scrambling once people's schedules are already really packed. We avoid all of that by locking it into the calendar up front. And this is what a quarterly planning, this is what one of the meetings looks like. So again, I know I went really fast. The tools will change. Process Street might not be around, Slack might not be around, but the concept here won't change. You need communication tools, you need planning tools, you need to document and digitize your knowledge in your company. So whatever the tool is, it doesn't matter, but I want people conceptually to be thinking about those 3 buckets as a operational framework. And it doesn't matter if you're using the right tool. If you're not using it correctly, it could hurt your productivity. So I'll end with this example, but when I was consulting for Ethereum, they had about 1,000 people. They were using Slack, which is the right tool, but they were using it in the wrong way. And they didn't have strategic naming conventions of channels. Most of their channels were defaulted to public. So people were sitting in all these random channels they didn't need to be in. So if you just work out the math, how much it costs to set up a tool incorrectly, if you assume that each message interferes with your flow state by a minute, say it takes 10 seconds to read, but it takes you out of your flow state for a minute. If it happens 60 times a day, that's an hour of productivity loss per person. If people's average rate is $50 an hour, it's $50 a day per person. So if you're 1,000 person company, it's a massive amount of cost to your company. So on a daily basis, they're losing this 20 days in a work month. That's $1 million a month. So obviously I made the numbers work out to have a nice round number, but it just gives you a sense that if you're not using these tools properly, and this is why I teach this stuff, and my added value is I helped people to get set up in the right way so that these are tools that help you with your productivity versus you could go down a rabbit hole where you were better off just using email for everything in the first place. So that's all I got for you with these slides. Again, I put some tools there at kb.getleverage.com. I have a free Facebook group. If you're interested in more content on this stuff, it's called Making Remote Work Actually Work. And my company is getleverage.com if you need help setting up anything. And my email is nick@getleverage.com. So I hope that was helpful. I'm happy to sit around and answer any questions, Kathleen, if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, it was definitely helpful, and I think kind of eye-opening, because in real estate it's fast-paced, and one of the hardest things is documenting the process. And then we get somebody trained, we get them up and running, we get this beautiful feeling of leverage, which everybody knows is amazing, and then they quit or they leave or something happens, and then the people don't want to hire because like all the pain to hire and train, and they haven't documented anything, and it's painful for sure. So I think really that's a part we struggle with, because it's one of those things until you get burned, it's hard to explain upfront, right?
Yep.
We do have a question. What would you recommend to use to document sales office, like a sales office procedural manual? Like I'm assuming, and this is just, you guys can send me a private question if you don't want to put it in a couple somebody has. So I'm assuming they mean for the different roles.
Well,
I think just overall procedural manual. What would you use to document that?
So we use Notion for that. So you should use a wiki, right? So when I say wiki, that's what I was calling static knowledge. That answers the question who, what, when, where, why. Yeah. So you have Guru, Notion. You could hack a Google Doc for this. Confluence. There's a whole bunch of tools. We like Notion. It's visually appealing, and it's really, it doesn't, there's basically no learning curve. You could set it up and within 30 minutes, you're using it properly.
And why Notion versus Process Street? So
Process Street's for processes. That answers the question how. Process Street is a much more complex tool to set up. So we would document our payroll process, which are like a big difference is Notion, you're just like writing out a list, you're writing a document, or you have bullet points, etc. Process Street generates, you document the process, but then every time you want to run the process, it generates a checklist. So it makes sure that you're following the order of steps each time that you have to execute the process. There's a great book called The Checklist Manifesto written by a surgeon. And what they found was once you put checklists into surgical rooms, it reduced the risk of error by like 84% or some number, something crazy like that. So the benefit of Process Street is if what you're talking about is a process like payroll or onboarding, it's not just documenting it in a Word doc, but it's making you go through each checklist item, making sure that you've completed that step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have something similar with a buyer plan. We find the same thing. If you can just get ahead of the steps, eventually you internalize it. But yeah, it requires you to get each task done in order before you move forward, in theory. Some people try to get around it, but technically it requires you to do it. And I'm just gonna check, okay, and she did clarify, yes, overall process. So I think that answers that question. Any other questions now? You can either put up your hand, I can unmute you, can type it in chat. We have Nick here, so definitely if you have any questions, take advantage of it. This is his area of expertise, that's for sure. I love the structure, like just the meetings and this. Right now, so many people going remote, we've had to talk a lot about structure for teams that are usually out on the road, having 1 or 2 in-person meetings a week. So we've had the huddles and then the training time, meeting time, agenda, all that fun stuff. Okay.
Yeah, one thing to emphasize with meetings is sending video and audio messages are such a huge productivity gain. Also for culture, having someone see your face, hear your voice. It's not just about saving time. It's much easier for me to communicate a 5-minute concept by recording a Zoom versus typing it all out, but also people are seeing my face. So a significant amount of the way that we communicate is recorded video and audio that we then post in the corresponding Slack channel. All right.
I find that faster even than, I guess it's more about connection, right? Because I mean, I do something really bad, I shouldn't admit, but I am a lover of voice to text because I can be doing 10 million things and just talk in and the poor people reading it are like, Cassie, what are you doing?
Yeah, so from your phone, you could just go to like the photo app and just record a video and then just send them the video recording instead of transcribing. True. Or you could do the voice memos and then at least they're hearing your voice.
So you actually have the connection factor. Yeah, good point. I'm going to try that and see if it's better for our team who's like, oh my goodness. Okay.
So someone wrote me privately, if you need to include a screenshot in the process, does Notion accommodate this? I'm not sure what that means, but Notion, you can embed photos, videos, and you could do the same in Process Street, which are things that I highly recommend. We use Cloud App for screenshotting. And I find if you're going to document a process in a robust way, you should use a screenshotting tool with annotation. Ultimately, with all this stuff, you want to make it dummy proof. So you want to make it so you could just hand this to someone, and without anyone else sitting there explaining it, they could follow the steps perfectly. So screenshotting tools with annotation embed into Notion and Process Street are really critical to have a well-documented process.
And I think because this is your world, it's easy for you to do this. I mean, this is our world is, go ahead.
No, look, I live and breathe this stuff, and I've been doing this for 5 years, and I'm still finding ways to be better, right? And it's a never-ending journey, and you can never be too efficient. The way that I use Asana now is totally differently than the way I used it 6 months ago. And I'd probably say my productivity had doubled in the last 12 months. And that was already starting from a pretty high benchmark. So there's always better ways of doing things. I think it's important to just have that student mindset. Never just get comfortable doing something a certain way. Like even with Asana, we started creating fake users and assigning tasks to fake users that don't exist yet, but we're in the hiring process for a director of operations. So we start assigning tasks to that person, and then when they get hired in 3 months or 6 months, we could just click a button and they already have 100 tasks to work on. So it's little things like that aren't rocket science, but it's using these tools in smarter ways to get the most that you can out of them.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if we've done on any of these masterminds, but we usually do that, like your vision of your org chart or your company in the future, and we're doing the same. Hey, we know this person is coming, so let's set it up for them now. And I think what I'm getting at is, yeah, we're always getting more efficient, but I know like our team's totally focused on systems and process and setting up systems for teams in real estate. And the reality is still for us, I mean, we've had a great advantage of working with your company because the reality is it's expertise level. And there's some things we need done that's not worth it for us to get to that level of expertise in-house. So it's been really helpful to have like, hey, we need this done. We need someone who knows how to do it. We don't want to waste time with it. Let's just get it done. And that's more of what I'm hoping to talk about in November at Summit, because that's been really crucial for us. So it's once you have your basic stuff down, the more advanced, like to me, get someone who knows what they're doing and just get it done. Like I don't want to get stuck in the muck of figuring things out personally, but yeah. So that's just, we use Nick and we're super happy. So if you're stuck with the more advanced technology stuff, Get Leverage is an amazing platform for it. And I don't see, oh, and your email is up there too. Thank you. If everyone sees that in the chat. I don't see any other questions on my side. And if you don't have any others there, Nick, I just want to thank you for your time. This is so invaluable. I know how many people are going to watch this again and be taking notes and trying to actually put it in place in their business. Oh, just thank yous coming out. Lucia is our admin, CRM, budget expert on our team. So she's going, you're making her very happy. So she's saying happy, happy, happy. Okay, so thank you again. And for everybody who is on here right now, thank you, Nick, for joining us. And next week, we have masterminds running Monday to Thursday. We took a vote about next Friday, not just because it's Easter Friday, but it's also, or Good Easter Friday? Good Friday, goodness, oh my goodness. But it's also a statutory holiday. So people opted to have a break. So we will be here Monday talking about all things and being proactive in this in-between time. We have Anthony Brown telling his story of Struck by Life, which is like coming back against all odds when he was never supposed to be able to walk again. If you haven't heard his story, like taking the bus to do open houses, like just overcoming all odds. He is such an inspiration. On Wednesday, we are going to have Victoria here to chat all things EQ and DISC and why EQ is more important than IQ for a lot of us in a crisis. So I'm so happy to have somebody who loves to chat about that with me. And she's going to be here sharing all of that with you. And then on Thursday, what am I talking about? Thursday, I'm talking about the mind-body connection and how our brain actually gets into a certain state of mind and what we can do to get ourselves more positive, more optimal, and why this really matters when we're communicating with other people right now. So we're going to go a lot into the how your brain operates, processes information, communicates, which allows you to understand how other people process and communicate. So have an amazing weekend. Thank you to everybody. We will see you next week, Monday to Friday, 1 o'clock, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Stay safe, stay strategic, tripping over my words. Thank you. Thanks, Nick. Bye.